Hi everyone, I want to talk to you today about the Fujita Seiko problem. Right, before I start, this is a bit of an ad hoc video just simply because of some things that have gone on over the last few days, and I want to state specifically, and I want to make this strong, this is in no way connected to Don Rolle's translation of Fujita Seiko Things or anything like that. It's actually, for those who wondered, coming about from something that's going on in Japan at the moment, and some stuff we've been involved with in Japan, and the way sort of people are relying on Fujita Seiko in Japan, which is a little bit confusing to me. So I want to just talk to you about it here so we get it out in air. I fully support Don Rolle's translation of the Fujita Seiko Things. I fully support Eric Shahan's translation of Gingetsu Ito's Things. The reason for this is when they're out, people can understand how history works. And a lot of people who've not been to university or have not studied history, if you don't realise that basically if you want to know something, you ask the people that were there. Yeah, but most of the time they are long dead by hundreds if not thousands of years. So you can do two things. You can read written records about it and work out what bits are correct and what bits are not, or you can check the archaeology and see what's been left behind, and that sometimes proves better than historical record. With the ninja we have neither. By that I mean in the Sengoku period, when ninja were doing what they were doing, there is no sort of like, we didn't have anybody who just chatted to a ninja in the Sengoku period and told us what happened. So what you have to do then is you have to go to the next best thing, which is the earliest historical record, and that comes in the early 1600s to mid 1600s when people start writing down the ninja traditions. Now they're the people who directly inherited ninja traditions from those from the Sengoku period, and they wrote them down. Now of course that means there's change gone on, but then the next step is you go to historians in the past who've looked at certain things. So in this case, now we're looking 20th century, we're looking 400 years on, Fujita Seiko, Yumio Nawa, Okusei, and to be honest, they're not historians, let's get that right, they're not historians, they're not trained academics, they're, one's a mayor and was promoting tourism, one's an enthusiast for weapons, and Seiko, I don't know, was a little bit of a crazy bod, to be honest, interesting but crazy. So you go to them, and then of course, you know, what we do is go back to the earliest primary sources. Now originally when I started this, I went to Japan, we were looking at all these books, we went through all of them, you know, not every page, but we started going through looking at them, and I started collecting all of the old books. And it very, very quickly became obvious to me, I mean really quickly, it became obvious that these 20th century researchers were a little bit like, they had good points and they had bad points, but before I could, what would be perfect is to go through and record all the good points and record all the bad points, but that would just take too much time, and we had the original scrolls there, so it's like, so from a historian's point of view, from a historical researcher's point of view, if you have the original scrolls, why go back, why only go back to the 20th century when you have the originals there? Another problem we have with Fujita Seiko and people like him, Yumio Nawa and all that, is I call it the Seiko conundrum. And it's the fact that they were the ones that collected, greatly so, they collected the manuals together and formed it into the Iga Ninja Museum. But the problem is, since about the 1990s, roughly, nobody's been allowed to see the sort of the scrolls, so nobody's allowed to see what's really in the scrolls, so that gives you a problem. When you read a Fujita Seiko book, you say, oh, you know, he must have known this, he must have got it from the scrolls, but we can't check that, so we can never, he doesn't say it's from this scroll, or if he does, then we know it is, but if he doesn't, he just says it's from this scroll. So we're like, is it from a scroll, is it not from a scroll, we don't know, did he just make it up? So then you're left with a Seiko conundrum, which is, there's some information by Seiko, he hasn't referenced where it's from, he hasn't said anything about which scroll, so you're like, is it in a scroll? Let me check. So you go to his collection, but nobody's allowed to view it. So you're just stuck with the, we don't know. So what you have to do is sort of build an idea of how trustworthy he is. So this is where it gets a bit crazy, and this, as I say, nothing to do with Don. Recently we've been dealing with stuff out in Japan, and there's a new sort of like, not fad, but there's a new burst of energy to look at Seiko stuff by some people. And we know, so for example, Fujita Seiko, Yumio Nawa, ninja books are full of shuriken, there's loads of shuriken about it, and there's loads connected to the ninja. But so the question is I've never found shuriken in ninja manuals, bar one, which is in the Iga Museum, which they've published and shown. So I went to Kawakami, who's looked at all of them, and I said, so where are the shuriken? If they're not in any of the public manuals, what about the Iga Museum? And he said, no, there's only the one I know of, Anthony, and it's there. So that tells us there, that's a good signpost that Seiko now, we're loving the shuriken, but they're not in the manuals. Like the guy who looks at the manuals daily says they're not in there. There's only one in one manual, and it's one shuriken. So all this idea of they've got tons of shurikens in their books and things like that, you're like, okay, but it's not in the manual. So the Seiko conundrum falls down there. We've gone through it. Somebody reads them, says, no, it's not there. Then on top of that, you get things that you know are obviously wrong, like the Mizugumo, the water spider, the seat, the floating seat. We know that's from the Bansen Shukai. It only exists in the Bansen Shukai. There is a couple of other scrolls, but they're copied from the Bansen Shukai. But it originates from there. And Seiko is the one that puts it on your feet, and he's the one putting it on your feet. And Yumio now is using it as a seat. Now, it's our opinion, I think it's most people's opinion now, that you actually use this as a seat. But what does that tell us? It tells that Fujita Seiko was just getting it wrong on some parts. So he's making things up, i.e. he's putting shuriken in there that don't exist in the scrolls. He's putting things on his feet that you should pretty much sit in. Then if you read his books, there's things like the ninja can do better than the world record high jump. The ninja can do better than the world record, like, day marathon, you know, running for one day. The ninja could do better. He basically created a superhuman ninja. And while we can't check his scrolls, we can check a good selection of scrolls. So it's like, there's nothing about long jump. Even Fujita Seiko talks about high jumping and long jumping and this, and you're like, huh? You know, like for example, Iga and Koga talks about jumping down from something because you've got to escape. But a running high jump, what are you going to do in ninjutsu with a running high jump apart from leap over backwards and land on your back? Because that's what high jumps do. They have to get that height. They have to go over backwards. And they're saying like almost 3 meters. And they're going to land on the other side on caltrops inside a guard dog really loud. It's just like, it doesn't fit. It fits more in a comic or imagination than it does. So while we can't see the scrolls that he was checking from, I think we can fairly assume that there's no record ninja high jump, and there's no record ninja long jump, and there's no, you know, obviously Kiai is a big thing out there. I don't know why, but Kiai entered the ninjutsu sort of things. What are you Kiaiing for on a secret mission? You're in the middle of a spying mission, and you're like, okay, you know, I'm in this guy's, yeah, you're like, what is that monk doing? You know, why would you Kiai in the middle of a shinobi mission? Or if you're creeping in, the band's as silent as the frost on the ground. Be quiet, buy a book. Yep, Mina-san, Genki desu ka? You know, you're just literally shouting. Why on earth would you have Kiai in the middle of it? So we can start to build an idea that Seiko is like, what are you doing, Seiko? You know, while some of it is awesome, some of Nao's stuff is there, some of Seiko's stuff. To be honest, the awesome stuff is actually the stuff they've directly taken from the ninja manuals, and you can recognise it. So when you look at Seiko stuff, it's like half good and half a little bit dubious, and a little, well, and some a remainder, whatever's like left over from you dividing it into just outright crazy. So what I'm trying to say to you guys is, just remember, before you give praise to people that, you know, have gone before you, you don't do that in science. I know we have, you know, people are like, they love old scientists, like, oh, this guy invented this guy created that, but that's not where science stayed. It didn't like sort of stay there and say, yes, you know, we learned this principle because this scientist said so. The end. We never study anything else. They move on. It's the same as history. History moves on. Richard III and all that with its, like, you know, the evil king is now they found him, and they've actually looked at the body he had. They've looked at possibly a different version. We have a totally brand new understanding of Richard III now because of some work being done. So you don't say, oh no, we're not going to go for that because in the 1950s they thought this, so anything that we do now we just forget about. That's not how science and academia works, guys. So it's okay to buy, and I fully recommend you buy Don's translations. I fully recommend you get Eric's translations so you can understand. We, and my team, will bring you the historical manuals. That's what we do. That's why I did it, because I didn't trust the people who were saying they were ninja. I didn't trust the 1950s guys. I didn't trust the 1910s guys. Then I went to the late, and you're like, no, okay, I got it as early as I could, and even then, you don't 100% trust them, you just know that they have the closest thing. People now have no passed down tradition, you know, it'd be ridiculously removed now from what it was. So, just be careful. I think you should buy the books that are coming out. I think you should understand who Seiko is. I think you should understand who Nawa is. But and as I say again, this is nothing to do with those translations. I'm just trying to support those translations because I totally support anybody who does anything to promote like the history of ninja. And what that does is allows us to see what they were thinking in the 1950s, 1930s. It tells us that, okay, this is what these guys were thinking then, and this is what the guys in the early Edo period were thinking. But I've come across recently some Japanese research where they actually put, you know, stock in Seikos working like, really? Ninja high jumps, ninja kiais, ninja long jumps, ninja this, you like, it's a little bit awkward. And wow, you know, I'm not going to go into it, but basically me and Yoshi and the team are like, what? And it isn't just our opinion, it's well, actually, yeah, I suppose it is just our opinion, but, you know, our opinion is based on lots of primary research and, you know, that type of thing. So we just think it's a little bit dubious, them relying on it now. So just to be aware, guys out there, that there is, you know, even in Japan, they sort of, they're more into the comic book. So let me say this right without insulting people. In Japan, they're very much into half tourism, half history. So it's not a case of let's get it right, it's a case of let's get it a little bit more correct. Let's get it more correct, but also let's get some tourists in, yeah? So as you guys know who are watching this, ninjutsu is to me is extremely interesting, but to most people it's quite boring. You have to be a bit of a nerd to like ninjutsu. And then it's a case of, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So basically, you know, it's really difficult to promote real ninjutsu because people go, oh, okay. So that leads me on to, lastly, is Stephen Nojiri's question. Stephen Nojiri is one of those who comes along every few months and he's like, must be bored or something at home. And he sort of like tries to raise hell. I'm like, what about this? And his new raising hell idea is to say, why study only the Sengoku period? And very quickly I'd like to answer that. So he's just started talking about why study the Sengoku, why not study the Edo? Because the Edo is a period of peace. You study the samurai are a warrior class. They're a military elite. They're a military dictatorship. And of course, there is lots of merit from studying the Edo period. Absolutely. But my question is, my question is dead easy, guys. It's taken, so far, I'm 8 years into my quest, the real quest, and I've only got 2 questions. It's the same question with one word switched out. And what did the samurai actually do? And the other one is, what did the shinobi actually do? That's my only question. That's it. And the rest of my life will revolve around those 2, or that one question. And why on earth would I go to the Edo period to find out what the samurai actually did? Of course the samurai existed in the Edo period, but they only exist as a standby. They're a warrior class with no job. They don't want to be at peace. These guys want to go to war, because that's the time when you get cash. And remember, samurai history starts in the 900s, and pretty much the warfare ends in the 1600s. So you've got at least 800 years where you've got eruptions of war. Now, I would love to go to the early eruptions. I'd love to go to the Heike Monogatari. I'd love to go to sort of like Masashige and the Kemi Restoration. I'd love all that. But the evidence for it is so slight, because remember, I don't want to know that faction talk to that faction. That's not my question. My question is, what did the samurai do? So to answer that question, the best time we can go to is the late Sengoku period. And the only way to sort of like find that out is to read the manuals from the early Edo period. There are very few late Sengoku period manuals, and we do go for them. If they're out, we get them. and but most of them are early Edo period. So to answer Stephen's question, it's like, why would you, you know, let's look at how submarines are used in the 1950s. The 1950s submarine is the same as a 1940s submarine. You know, very, not much changes there. Most change happens in World War II. So why would you study submarine routine in the 1950s when you've got World War II, when they were at action? A submarine is like a samurai. It has one job: to serve the crown and to fight the enemies, and to keep the enemies at bay. It's a deterrent, it's a fighter. So why on earth would you go to like their average day at the pub versus the height of their combat efficiency? I think it's a strange question, Stephen. I think it's a bit silly. I'm not calling you silly, Stephen. I just think you're trying to find something there that's not needed. It's great if you want to learn about the period of peace. If you want to learn about the effect of peace on the Bushi class, go to the Edo period. Sounds extremely interesting. Or we could study what samurai, because remember, what's my question? What did the shinobi actually do? So we go to the end of the Sengoku period. I'd love to go earlier, but there's just no evidence for it. Right guys, my name is Anthony Cummins. I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, get Don's books, get Eric's books, get my books, get everybody to... It's better to have us talking and arguing about which historian, which person to check, than ninja martial arts, which happened for 40 years. I think that's pretty much dead in the water now. But let me just say, this thing that's triggered this video is even talking about ninja martial arts, and you're like, oh no. Even the people, the Buji kind of like, no, there isn't, even they agree now. We're all happy and in agreement. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll speak to you next time. I'm going to crack on with some work now, and I'll speak to you later.